Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Tonight we're going to go ahead and begin Chapter 5, helping your horse keep up with the cart. Sometimes we get so busy as we teach, sometimes we kind of get a little ahead of ourselves in our lesson planning, and so this chapter right here is going to kind of help us keep things in balance. And really what we're going to be looking at are techniques for organizing our courses. So let's take a look at Chapter 5, see what it has to tell us. In vocational education, we utilize a process in order to get our curriculums prepared and ready for our students, so that they'll learn what we need them to learn. And so we have an instructional process that we utilize on a regular basis for any kind of occupation. First thing you need to do is to run a needs assessment. Is there a need for the kinds of skills that you want to teach your students out there in industry? Let's face it, today we are in a budget crunch at all levels of education, and right now we just don't have the luxury of having programs on the books and in place that are teaching obsolete skills. At one time, our particular school had a radio and TV repair program. We taught a great number of students how to work on televisions, and they made very good livings as TV repairmen. But today, those kinds of skills are certainly not in demand, because today we pretty much have a throwaway system. We buy a TV, they're relatively cheap compared to what they were 20 years ago. And once we buy it, we use it, and sooner or later it'll wear out, and all we do is take it to the dump, go buy another one. It would cost more in the labor and with the parts to go out there and repair the thing. And so you need to know if there is a demand out there for your particular skill. Once that's determined, then we do what is called a job analysis. Individuals or an individual will go in and just kind of be the shadow of someone doing a particular job and sit there and document everything that person does. This is a very tedious and very drawn-out procedure, but it's critical for us to know exactly what skills, what knowledge is necessary for a particular occupation. You look at anything and everything associated with that job, internally, externally. And then once you do that, the last step is a task analysis. You look at the specific tasks that are done, and you start from basic and work towards advanced. You just list them, you see what has to be done, learn first, what has to be learned second, what skill builds on another skill, until you have what we call the scope and sequence of the curriculum. The scope pretty much refers to the overall beginning to the end portion of the curriculum. And then how do you teach those components and in what sequence? So this is not something that's done overnight. It takes a long time to do it, and to do it right. The next thing is to develop some performance objectives. Now, What are some of the things that you might see in some performance objectives? Well, there's three parts to it. First of all, the action that the students must be capable of performing. What is it that they need to do? That has to be spelled out specifically. Then second, the condition under which they are expected to perform. I guess kind of using the example of our truck driving program. Let's go back to the first part. Let's say they're on the backing pad, and they are supposed to be able to back a flatbed trailer between a set of cones. So that would be the action that they're supposed to be performing. Now, the conditions under which they're expected to perform. Is it dark? Is it raining? Is it during the sunlight? Are there a whole lot of other trucks around them? Do they have a certain set of limits on the distances, that they have to be able to back that that trailer into? And so those kind of conditions would just need to be spelled out. And then the third thing, the standard or standards of performance they must reach. That would kind of maybe refer to the time. There may be a time limit. They have to be able to back that trailer up within, let's say, 2 minutes or 3 minutes, something like that. They may have only maybe 1 or 2 tries. They can't go forward, go backward. It has to be maybe just one continuous motion backward. So you just have to kind of lay out those standards. But those are the 3 critical portions of a performance objective. You've got to have the action that's got to be taking place, the condition under which it takes place, and the standard to which you expect the student to perform. That's got to be laid out in the objective statement. And then there's some questions that you got to answer. Who is performing the action? Obviously, it'll probably be the student. Second point, at or in what time the action is performed. You may have some time criteria for some of your lessons, or else I could also refer to the time that they're doing it, the time within the scope of the course. After chapter 4, you would have a skills test for them. So you're just specifying when that's got to be done. What conditions is the action performed? What conditions have you set up? Or are they the same as they would see in industry? Maybe you can model that. Maybe you can't. Maybe you might have to use some kind of virtual kind of environment. Maybe you have some kind of computerized type of software that can kind of give them a virtual view of what's being done. That would work too. In what amount is the action performed? Maybe there's a situation where you've got to have some measurable amount that something is done. Let's just say for welding, for example, you have students do something that's, from what I hear, is not done very much, but let's say you have a lesson where they would take and braze 2 pieces of metal together, and in order to see if they've brazed the 2 pieces together, you put it under a hydraulic press, and let's just say you've set the standard as it has to withstand 20,000 psi of pressure before it breaks. And so you set the metal down there, and then you just crank the handle, or else whatever it is that you use to kind of engage the press, and see if that braze weld can hold. And if it can't, then the student needs to do it over again until they get to the point where they can, their brazing skills can produce welds that will take that kind of pressure and not break. Same thing with just a regular old type of welding process too. And last but not least, how is the action measured? Are you going to give them a test? True, false, multiple choice, fill in the blank? Are they going to have to be graded while you watch them perform the task? Do you have some kind of checklist to kind of make sure that they cover everything that they're supposed to? I like to watch our driving instructors when they are on the backing pad. They have their clipboards, and they've got some criteria that they check off, and they have a point value for every one of those skills, and they either add or deduct points, and they have a standard that the student has to have so many points in that backing test or driving test, whatever they're doing, and if they don't get it, they fail the competency, then they got to do it again till they can get a passing grade. Now, let's talk a little bit about the brain, and maybe, I guess, people in general. We've got a lot of theories about how the brain works, how we learn. And your book talks about some learning domains. And they look at 3 different domains. The first is your cognitive domain. The cognitive domain deals with how you and I learn things. Our brains are just marvelous organs. From the day we're born, or even before we're born, our brains are working and constantly learning and constantly interacting with our environment. And you and I do a whole lot of thinking whenever we're learning. We are taking those brain cells and trying to see patterns, trying to learn steps, trying to see connections, trying to memorize information. And so we read, we see things, all that goes into our brains. New neural paths are kind of laid down as we get all this information, and so that just continues throughout our lifetimes. But we have some material that is pretty much information that we're going to have to learn, and by doing it. And I guess the best example that I can think of right now is math. That whenever we learn 1 and 1 plus 1 equals 2, and we start building on that, those mathematical principles, and we start moving towards more and more complex kinds of problems. We move into algebra, calculus, and things like that. It's not like we can just go out there and manipulate those things with our hands, like in the psychomotor domain. All of that is usually done up in our brains. We're trying to see how these problems can be solved. And so we have a whole lot of learning that takes place in that kind of context, where we're reading things, we are may sometimes be writing things, but trying to put together all kinds of information and make sense out of it. And it's all done between our ears. The affective domain is a little different. I kind of look at that as probably like our culinary arts program we have at the Lafayette School. Obviously, these students learn all kinds of skills. How to chop and cut up foods, how to cook them. But another thing they learn how to do is how to present the food. I know, talking with one of the chefs, one of the instructors there, they say that presentation is almost as important as how the food tastes, because people, if they see something that looks good, chances are they're going to think it's good. And so that kind of gets into like the art kind of realm, and maybe the arts, I guess, in general, where people are making music, doing paintings, doing things that really, I guess, motivate the sense of beauty and wonder that people have. And certainly we have all kinds of people who are kind of artisans in what they do, even in vocational education. These culinary arts students, every now and then we'll have a foundation get together in Lafayette, and some of the graduates will cook all kinds of dishes and showcase their dishes, and they're just beautiful. And so that, I guess, kind of moves things a step further from just having the knowledge that it takes to do something. But yet, we have many other vocational programs that people learn a term, I guess, that's kind of gone away now, but that's craftsmanship, where you have the pride factor in your work, and that your work is recognized by a whole lot of people. One of my former colleagues was a bricklayer, and he said he could drive down Lafayette and tell you what crew, what contractor laid those bricks, because he said that those bricklayers all had their certain technique that they used, and they were just as those techniques were just identifiable as any other kind of traits because of their craftsmanship. So we have a whole lot of learning in vocational education that has something to do with the affective domain, but really where we are is the third domain, the psychomotor. We have all kinds of skills that people have to learn that involve manipulating things, hand-eye coordination, that connection between the brain and the senses. And let's face it, personally, I think this is probably the most complex, because you just don't learn how to do a skill overnight. It takes practice, 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 and more practice. It's doing it over and over again till it becomes second nature to you. I guess I'll kind of use a football analogy with that. It's one thing to watch Drew Brees on a Sunday afternoon tearing up all kinds of defenses in the NFL, but what you and I don't see are the hours and hours that he spends with his receivers running those pass patterns over and over and over again till it's just second nature to them. They could do it in their sleep. But that is what separates us from a whole lot of other learning that takes place in education. We have the psychomotor domain that is critical to our particular curriculums right there. Now, how do you and I organize our lessons? Well, 4-step method. Any more than that, I won't remember them, and if you're like me, you probably won't either. But 4 of them, not too bad. Step 1, motivation. You and I have got to get our students motivated to learn. And certainly, right up front, we ought to tell these students why they're learning this and why it's going to be a good thing for them to learn. Second, the presentation. That gets into the nuts and bolts of how you and I are going to present that lesson to that class. We've only got 50 minutes, 55 minutes, maybe 2 hours, whatever it is. We've got a lesson that has to get done. We've got to know the time constraints that we're under, and then we can kind of fill in the information from there. Application. How do they apply that knowledge? Will they have a chance to do it right then and there? That's what we would hope. You demonstrate or you present that lesson to the students, and then right as soon as you're done, they get ready to do the same thing, and they apply that knowledge. And fourth, and probably most importantly, is your evaluation. Did they learn what you taught them? If they did it, you need to go back and reteach it. And this may be something you'll have to do more than once. But we always need to evaluate just how effective we were in the presentation of that lesson. And obviously we can tell if we give tests and see what those grades are. If half the class flunked the test, chances are you and I didn't do our job. Well, you might say, well, they just didn't study. Well, maybe not. But if you have a class of 20, would you expect 10 out of those 20 to fail? Maybe a very simple type of kind of lesson. We really need to look at ourselves critically, and not be afraid to do so. So, those are your 4 steps. Now let's just take a look at the lesson plan. I'm not going to give you a form to fill out or anything like that. For your little assignment, I've got a form to use, but it is by no means the perfect form. You just use whatever's going to work for you when it's all said and done. First thing you're going to put is the subject. What's the title of what you're doing? That subject ought to be whatever it is you're teaching. If you teach more than one subject, like math or English or something like that, put on there somewhere that it's a specific type of subject that you're dealing with. And then the specific title of the lesson. What is it you're you're covering that for that particular lesson. The type of lesson. Is it a demonstration? Is it a lecture? Is it something else? Is it a combination? What time period? If you teach multiple classes, you'll say this is like my first hour, second hour, third hour period. Or else, what you can also do is just say the time period that it's going to take to present the lesson. Don't be afraid to put more than one day. There may be some lessons that will take days for you to complete. So just get an idea of what kind of time frame you're looking at here. The place. You might be in your lab, you might be outside of the lab, you might be even outside demonstrating some things. Just say where this lesson is going to take place. I don't know how they do it now, but some of my best lessons used to be field trips to places. Students really loved that. Any training aids that you might need, that you might have on hand, like videos or let's say models or working things like like a car. Let's say you were donated one of these cars that was flooded. Well, you've got yourself an automobile. The real thing that you can work on and tear down. Your objectives, as we've spoken before, what it is you're going to teach. Instructor references. Do you have any kind of references that you're going to need to get your hands on in order to, like textbooks, reference materials, whatever. Have them on hand so you're not going out there and kind of looking around for those things. And any kind of student references and homework that they may have after the lesson's over with. That ought to be all down there on the lesson plan. Now, your lesson outline can follow a number of different models. I'm still not going to hold you to any one of them, but there are a number of ways to look at this. First of all, your outline could be in chronological order, where you kind of follow a logical sequence, step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4, that have to be done in sequence. Spatial order kind of deals with the I guess how things are arranged. One of the things that you have to do in a lot of programs is that you have to kind of set up your work. You need tools where they need to be, where you can find them. You need your materials either pre-cut or laid out or available to you. And so you're looking at that spatial relation between those things. And then psychological order. I guess that's just basically the best way that I can explain that is pretty much what makes sense to you. Obviously, for some from textbooks, basically have all of your lessons laid out for you. If you're using a state curriculum, it's already laid out for you right from day one. What you're supposed to teach, when you're supposed to teach it, how you're supposed to teach it. But also, from a psychological standpoint, you kind of have to know when students are ready for those kinds of lessons, when they're mentally prepared for them. Let's face it, chances are I wouldn't schedule a very critical, maybe like safety lesson or something like that on a machine whenever it's pep rally day and you're on a short schedule. Might want to save that for a regular class period where you've got the time to be able to cover that, and those students don't have 50 other things on their minds. They're psychologically ready and prepared to be able to hear what you've got to and see what you've got to give them. You also should have some kind of introduction to kind of tie in the previous lesson with what's being done at that particular time, and that works really well to kind of introduce the lesson of the day, the presentation itself, either lecture, demonstration, combination, whatever it takes, the application, how do they apply it, and then finally some way to evaluate what kind of job you did with the lesson. All right, so that wraps up this particular chapter. I've got another little video to kind of go over the assignment with you, and so don't forget to take a look at that one. It sort of explains what you need to do. And so that being said, I'll go ahead and stop this recording.